What is the most inappropriate thing that you have ever witnessed at a funeral?
When my partner Steve died unexpectedly. For Steve's funeral, my daughter and I went in the first limousine, with his daughters and ex-wife number one. She had been unfaithful to Steve with his best friend, and left him for that friend, sat in the second limo. Steve wanted myself and his daughters in the first limo and his siblings in the second limo. He didn't include either of his ex-wives in any of his plans because they were not relevant. However, his daughters wanted their mum to feature in his funeral. When we arrived at the crematorium for the service, the funeral assistants from John Drage Funeral Directors, Wellingborough, 1. My daughter and I walked into the chapel first. Steve wanted myself and his daughters in first, but they stood back with their mother. And as I got to the front row, I expected to sit in the first seat. The funeral assistant waiting there, Spencer, was the second daughter's friend, and as I approached the first seat he told me to sit by the wall, possibly because Steve's daughters, aged 34 and 40 years, didn't want to acknowledge their parents' divorce 17 years earlier, or that Steve had divorced a second wife, and had been with me for 8.5 years. I was surprised, but I complied, for Steve, and walked to the side of the front row. Steve would loathe a kerfuffle at his funeral. Steve's first ex-wife came along behind my daughter and I and threw herself into the first seat with his two daughters quickly following. My daughter and Steve's sister Anita called me back to the middle, and I sat 5 seats along from the chief mourner's seat. I thought this was rude, but the funeral was about Steve's daughters, not to commemorate Steve. There were numerous things Steve wanted for his funeral. We had extensively discussed our funeral desires after my brother died 3 months earlier. And his daughters ignored all of them, but such is life.